live. Let me make sure all the social channels are on. Well, that one's right. That one's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And I think everything's right. Unable to connect. That's okay. All right. I think we're good. Okay. So, all right, let's do it. Let me make sure I have your information. Okay. I just got back from the gym, so I'm a little exhausted. But that's good because then I won't be as hyper.
Well, no, but yeah, you were level afterwards.
Oh, and by the way, should I say that I know that technically your office is Winter Park, but do you want me to use a different, some people say, oh, mention I work in this area. Is Winter Park the right thing to say?
Well, I will say Central Florida.
Perfect. Central Florida.
Because it's just, we are all over.
Is Ocala, is that Central Florida?
That Ocala? Is these days, yes. Everybo's going there because houses are better prices over there.
I've been there once a long time ago. It was kind of like a different world there. It was
it's different
a little bit of a different world
now. It's different now.
But you know what I thought was really interesting was that the homes there around that area, they all have those big nettings over their backyards to keep out the bugs. Whether they have like
that's most places in Florida.
Is that most places? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's smart. I mean, it makes sense.
To protect. It especially protects the pools, but most people don't know that.
Yeah, no, it's great. Anyway. All right, here we go. This all looks good. And see, no one's watching, so we're good. Okay.
That's okay.
Here we go. All right. Okay, today is Marisol Jusino from Coldwell Banker. She services Central Florida. Let me tell you more about Marisol. Now, Marisol is Latina. She is a single mom. She is a domestic violence survivor and a realtor for the last 19 years, actually 20 years. By 2010, she realized as much as she loved serving people, Marisol did not have proper sales training. So she went on to timeshares for its training, and in January 2013, returned to real estate. Once back in real estate, while facing life's continuous challenges, which at times made it extremely difficult to work, Marisol realized that business kept on moving without doing much at the time. Her phone was ringing and transactions were closing. And that's when she realized she had learned to tap into a forgotten community within the industry, the Latino community, the largest growing minority in the United States. Marisol has been able to grow her agency and her confidence in ways she never thought possible. She is a top realtor in Florida. Learn more about Marisol by visiting her website, which is G12, so the letter G12, professionalgroup.com, G12professionalgroup.com. By the way, we'll have a link to that in the show notes, so you don't have to type it in. And please, please, please follow her on Instagram. That's M Jusino, 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 MJUSINO, the number 1 at Instagram. Again, link to that as well in the show notes. So when I make a mistake, you don't have to worry because you just click on it in the show notes. Marisol, we are excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am excited to be here.
I am so excited to talk with you and talk about how you have grown your business and what our audience can gather from you. And it is a holiday weekend while we're recording this. So we are going to try to make this as light and breezy as possible so that if anyone is watching us as we record it live, they can enjoy right into the holiday weekend. Marisol, love to learn more about how you got into real estate. Tell me the process there. How and why?
Well, the why was that I needed to do something. I was in a domestic violence situation and I knew I needed to get out of there. I didn't know how. And as crazy as it sounds, years before, I used to live in Ohio. I had a friend and she said, she took me to a meeting with her friend and her friend was a broker. And her friend said, well, let's just recruit her. And my friend says, well, no, she has little kids. You have no idea what you'll do to her. But that stayed in my mind. Then just before I moved to Florida, and I'm talking to a good friend. And at this point, I know that life is hard and I have no idea what the future held. And I say, but I don't even know what to do over there because back in Ohio, I used to work for NASA over there.
Wow.
But I didn't want that 9 to 5 and that strict, schedule. Plus, I was going to be living a bit of a distance from NASA. So she said, why don't you just become a realtor? And so I'm like, that's two voices. So I kept that in the back of my mind. So then when life began changing, I'm like, you know what, let's do this. So I called a friend, which was my neighborhood expert. She was a realtor. She lived two houses down from me. She said, you need to go for it. I've always known you're supposed to be a realtor. I'm like, how everybody knows, but I don't know. So she counseled me. I went and I took the license, the classes. The weekend before I took my state exam, I did a 10-mile race and I broke my leg.
Oh no.
So I'm thinking this is it. And I said, okay, God, when I am in that test, if I don't pass, I'm done. But I guess I was supposed to be here. I did pass it. So that's kind of my story.
Well, I always love the expression, and this is I'm not promoting or denying anyone's religious beliefs, but I always love the expression, whatever anyone's spiritual beliefs are, that God never gives you more than you can handle
Yep.
in a given moment. Although it does get tested.
Oh, yes.
and breaking your leg a day before a somewhat challenging exam is not the easiest or
Yeah.
most
The
fun thing
weekend
to do.
before. The weekend before.
The
Yeah.
weekend before, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting too that there are people that seem to show up in our lives. Again, whatever anyone's belief is about the universe or higher power or whatever, there are things that happen where sometimes people just know things about you that you don't know,
Yeah.
and if you just listen,
Yep.
sometimes it's like, oh, and a couple people are telling me to do this, maybe I should do it, and
Yeah.
obviously it worked out really, really well for you. So tell us what it was like getting into really an industry that you didn't have experience in before. Was that challenging? How did you grow your business?
It was. I mean, because first you don't know much, obviously, because we learned, and everybody tells you when you take the real estate class, you're just taught how to pass an exam, not to how to sell real estate. I did have a lot of support. There's always good agents that try to help you and so forth. As crazy as it sounds, my very first listing, it was my son. And he was just 7 years old, 8 years old. And he goes to his, again, everybody believes what they believe, but he goes to his Sunday school teacher and he says, by the way, do you happen to know anybody that needs
You
to buy
got to
a
be. Hold on.
home?
I'm stopping the story because there's no way this story is true. When you
Yeah,
first said, I want to just back up in case anyone missed that. So Marisol said something that at first I thought I clearly heard this wrong, and I'm not going to interrupt her. And then when she got it, I go, no, I heard it right, and I'm only pausing you because this is the cutest story I've ever heard.
yeah.
So she said her first listing was from her son who is 7 years old, and he goes into school. And go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, he asked him, do you happen to know anyone that needs to buy or sell a home? And he looks at him and he says, as a matter of fact, I do. I am thinking about selling. I said, well, you need to use my mom because she just got her license. And that was my first listing.
That is the
That's
most adorable.
yeah,
I've done 500 episodes. That's without
yeah,
exception, the cutest and most
yeah,
adorable story that could ever be for someone's first listing. Cheers,
yeah,
cheers to your son.
yeah,
That is really, oh boy, that's about having a good family team right there. So,
yeah,
oh my gosh, how cute is that? Well, what an adorable story, and what a great son.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so cute. So, okay, so aside from that, did everything sort of continue to grow from that one
It
listing?
just began. It was just happening. I mean, doing what the basic things that we do, yes, because the stuff does happen. But nevertheless, at the same time, on my personal life, I was going through a divorce and all the craziness. So life was crazy. Life was crazy, but somehow things always worked out. I mean, don't ask me how, things always did work out. Um, but by 2010, that's when I was, because a lot of agents left the market in 2008 when the
Tons,
market crashed.
tons.
And the funny thing is that they usually say, if you last 5 years, you're going to stay on the market. And I'm like, well, you know what? Even if I sell one listing a year, I'm staying. It's like I need to beat that mark. But honestly, by 2010, I was worn out and I had no idea what to do, overwhelmed in every sense. And that's when I left and went into timeshares because I needed training. I needed training.
There is there is so many people that left in that time because for those of us that weren't in real estate at during that time, this of course is when the crash happened. This was a lot of the loans that were done with, they
Yeah.
were very generous with loans. Florida in
Yeah.
particular was
Oh,
hit
yes.
very hard because they had much easier restrictions there. And so, and like every third or fourth person in Florida had a real estate license at that time. It
Yep.
was some crazy statistics. So everybody had a
Mhm.
license. People were making money hand over fist, and they were just selling and reselling properties.
Yes.
And then of course the collapse happened, and it was devastating for many people. So I love the fact that you at that point said, I really could use more training. And, the timeshare world, despite what anyone might think about that type of business, the salesmanship that is
Yeah.
taught in those rooms for those companies is beyond impressive because it
Yes.
it works.
Yes, it does. They're training. And when young people come to me and ask me, what should I do? I'm thinking about joining real estate. And my advice is always, please do it, get the license, go sell timeshares for a few months.
Yeah,
Because then
it's
if you
yeah.
go in, you'll be awesome.
Well, and those are particularly tough because and I know like my parents used to do this when they were younger, when they maybe didn't have as much money, but they would have somehow they would be on lists where they would get flown to like Las Vegas, and they would go for get free room and maybe a free hotel, or sorry, free airline. I'm not sure, and you'd have to sit through a presentation, but most of the people in that room are doing the same sort of thing. They don't really want to buy a timeshare, so it's a
No.
very difficult sale because if the person's ready to buy, it's great. But the vast majority of people just want the freebie, and
Yep.
so it does make it
Mhm.
a challenge. And there's a lot of objections to overcome, and
Yeah.
you're asking for a lot of someone's money. And it's a very very difficult sale. So I think you're right. There's the sales training there has got to be just
Yeah.
amazing.
It sure is.
Yeah. Okay. So you were in timeshares. You got the sales training, and then you decided eventually to return to the traditional
Yes.
brokerage world. Yeah.
Yeah, well, after I left timeshares, and I am like, because I had said to myself, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm thinking, what do I do with my life? And I received a call from a former client, and he says, listen, I don't know why on earth I'm making this call, but I need to talk to you. And I'm like, well, you tell me. And he says, call me crazy, but you need to go back to real estate. He says, you were born for that. You need to go back. And I just smiled because at that point I was actually coming from meeting with a broker. Just because I had also a friend that called from the Miami area. And she said, listen, I don't know if you're still in real estate, but I want to buy a condo, in the Orlando area. We have 400,000 cash. Can you help us? And I'm like, heck yes. Yeah.
Yes and yes.
Yeah. So that was my way back in. That was my
Wow.
way back in. And then at that point, it's just, it was relearning because yes, I had learned the selling part, but now it's like learn relationship part of the business. How and plus the technicalities because there's so much technology that everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything changes. So it was time to do that. But I was going through life. I still, because unfortunately, my case, I was in an abusive relationship, as I mentioned. I divorced in 2005, but it wasn't until literally early last month that everything finally ended because there was an
Oh,
injunction. So it's been really a drain. So it's just at sometimes you wonder, and that's when I noticed it's like, hold it. I mean, I'm still making it. Things are happening. Even in the worst days, there's always the ball is still rolling.
yeah.
And that's when I'm like, but what is it? And I began looking at my book of business, and it's referrals of referrals of referrals.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 years ago, I closed my first buyer. I closed them all over again, you know. So it's like
Amazing.
that referral book. When you
Yeah.
stay in touch with them, and when you do what you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
they stay loyal.
They do. And first, I also want to honor you for sharing about your the challenges you've faced and the victimization that happened to you, and the fact that you were dealing with that not only while it was happening, but for about 17 years or
Yeah,
18 years
18.
after.
Mhm.
18 years. I mean, that is a heavy, heavy bag to carry
Yeah.
around, and it is not an easy thing. So I honor you for carrying that bag for as long as you did. I know that can't possibly be easy. And also a good reminder, I think, to anyone out there that knows of maybe somebody that's in a similar situation, that is currently in a similar situation, and maybe the person's afraid to leave because maybe they don't think about how they don't understand how they could support themselves if they were to leave a relationship, and maybe they think, well, it's better to be in even an abusive one than non-abusive one because at least I can pay the bills in this abusive one, which of course is not a great place to be. And to sometimes it's just a couple of people to say, hey, I think you can do this. And
Yeah.
so it's a great reminder to encourage people who are trapped or who feel trapped in those sadly abusive relationships to maybe see a pathway out. And so I
Yes.
honor you for sharing that. We have thousands and thousands of listeners. I guarantee that story is going to touch somebody, and maybe even inspire somebody who might be in that situation or know someone in that situation to maybe see a different path. And so I honor you for the courage to talk about that. Thank you.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
and I also want to talk about the Hispanic market because I know that here in Chicago, which is where I'm located, we have a large Hispanic population, and there is a tendency because we have about 800 agents here at our own company. So I just talk to a lot of agents, and I'm always recruiting agents for our firm. So I'm always talking to agents, and whenever somebody brings up the Hispanic sort of demographic for finding buyers and sellers, a lot of times what agents will say is, oh, well, I don't know that market. I don't know what those what that group of people is looking for. I don't know how to communicate with them. I don't really know how to infiltrate or penetrate that market to really get in. And so I would love any just information or advice you might have, because you're right, it is the largest minority minority group growing at the fastest rate in our country. So it's important to certainly not ignore that group, but
Yeah.
learn maybe how to better communicate with that group and understand what their needs and desires are. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, in summary, because there's so much that you can do, but the big question is, and most people say, well, what do I do? Just like you express, it's like this, and everything that is unknown, we kind of tend to stay away from it. But it's not that hard because to begin with, about 70% of the Hispanic population speaks English.
Right.
So that's one thing. Yes, will it help to speak Spanish? Well, of course it will. But if you don't speak Spanish, um, chances are your buyer or seller will speak English. There's a big chance. Most of the buyers right now, the Hispanic buyers, are 30 and below, 30 years old and below, which means they have been born and raised in this country. So they are, they know the language. So that's the first thing. But that's about English. That's about talking about English or Spanish. But knowing the Hispanic or the Latino language it really is more than is it English or Spanish. It's how do we communicate? What's going on in there? It will help, of course, to know a little bit of maybe the basics, because you gain trust when you speak about the basics. When you say a few words in Spanish, like most people will say, well, I took Spanish when I was in high school. That's really, really sweet, but I have forgotten all about it. But what about if we add, but I hope that you can teach me how to, that kind of, you can help me remember those little nuggets,
I love that.
that will help. That will really help. Um, and it's also the respect, you know because when you are honest, because honesty will be the best policy. You have to be honest. If you are not, if we don't perceive that you're being honest, you'll be treated nicely, but that there's going to be a wall. And if so happens that you do a transaction with that person, that's the end of it. That's the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as crazy as it sounds, it might be even better not to do the transaction, but keeping the relationship.
Yeah. Maybe
I've
even
had.
referring it to an agent who really is immersed into that community.
Mhm. Because it's the transparency and explain the processes from A to Z. What I usually tell my buyers and my sellers, what you see is what you get. I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, the pretty, and the ugly. You're going to know it all. And there's a lot of time spent on that orientation, whether it's the buyer's orientation or the listing presentation. A listing presentation with a Hispanic is not going to last you 20 minutes. I'm sorry to tell you that. If it's usually not going to, because they want to get to know you, and we are not going to tell us our stuff until we know that you can be trusted.
Ah, that's really interesting. So I was while you were talking about that, I was thinking. I know here in Chicago, there are a tremendous number of Hispanic cultural events. There are places where Hispanic people gather. There's certain events and experiences that they tend to have. And if I wanted to immerse myself in that culture to get more business, I would be going to a lot of those events. I'd be in the background for a while, learning about that culture, learning about how they communicate, what's important to them, and then eventually, sort of working my way into having them see me as a trusted advisor. But you're right, it isn't going to happen overnight.
Is not that's a good step to begin with, to get, so if that's personal knowledge. So you'll get that personal knowledge. You can go to events in which you're going to meet people one on one. Although I really believe, I mean, with so many Hispanics in the US right now, everybody knows at least one. I mean, everybody does. It's like build that relationship, because from that relationship, you're going to be selling to everybody. And when I mean everybody, is literally if they love you and trust you, you call them or you say, listen, I need help on this, they will. But again, you have to reimburse that. I mean, when they call you, and they will call you for little things, sometimes, their computer broke, as crazy as it sounds. Can you help me? Well, I have learned a lot about computers by helping them, because it is Hispanics value family and culture.
Absolutely. And family and culture are, yes, I would have, if you were to say what would my guess be about what I know about Hispanic community, I would say family and culture as well. So
Yeah.
that is that rings true with my experience. I have a Hispanic name. I am not really Hispanic myself. My first name is Delphin, and my middle name is Joaquin. So I have a Spanish from Spain, a Spain Spanish
Okay.
name. But
Yeah.
anyway, but the point is was not raised in that culture, and so as a result, but I do know we have, gosh, probably a few hundred of our agents are Hispanic here at Kale. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. It's about earning trust, because I think what sometimes people forget about people who come to this country or who are in a minority group that are here is that they're oftentimes, and I mean, we should just be honest about it. These are, Hispanic people are often treated less than non-Hispanics, and
Yeah.
all other minorities get treated this way too. And we have to remember, especially if we're not a minority, to remember that not everyone's treated the same. And so some groups are going to naturally be a little bit more defensive, or that's going to take more time to earn their trust because of the way they're treated on a regular basis. And so, this idea that, it would be great if everyone was treated the same.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's not exactly the way it is yet. So, earning that trust is not an automatic.
No, it's not. But the reality is, and that's just a little nugget, the reality is that most, which is really interesting, as I was looking at numbers, most Hispanics right now, I mean, they have been American born. So that means, yes, they're Hispanics. And when you get one, you get the family. But the culture is changing in the sense that there's more communication. We're beginning to see beyond, you're this or you're that, because most of them, the growth of the Hispanic population since 2010 is due to Hispanics being born in America, not other,
Not
not
emigrating. Yeah.
immigration, not
Right.
immigration,
Yeah, that makes
which is
sense. And
amazing.
and that opens up that a lot of times, like you were saying, sort of resolves the language barrier that could exist, because the second generation, or the people that were born here, obviously are speaking English. Maybe not, it might not be their first language, but they certainly grew up in our school systems and learned
Yeah.
English as well. Yeah, that makes sense.
Plus, but I'm sorry. No, what I was going to say, but it does help to learn to communicate, because once you get to them, you're going to be going home, and mom and dad, chances are they speak Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's never been well, I don't it's never easy to learn anyone else's language, but it's never been easier, because we have these devices in our pocket that we carry around 24/7. Like, there's Duolingo, there's a number of the learn a language apps. And maybe you won't speak perfectly within a year of studying, but you'll know enough to be able to at least show the community that you're putting effort into learning their culture, their language,
Yes.
their traditions. And of course, Hispanic people have traditions. It's important to honor these traditions, to be part of them, to learn about them, so that you can participate.
Yes, but it can be learned. I mean, it really, and I say that because I moved into this country. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and I moved in '89. And when I moved from Puerto Rico, and I ended up in the Cleveland, Ohio area, I didn't know the language.
Sure.
I couldn't speak the language, and I understand the frustration when you're learning a second language. But if I tell people, if I did it, anybody can. You know?
And there couldn't have been, or I don't know Cleveland all that well, but there couldn't have been a large Puerto Rican
No,
community in Cleveland, right? That had to be very, very small.
no, know where I was, and I didn't know anybody. But this is just a funny story. The funny story is that I'm like, okay, I mean, I need to learn the language. So I turn on the TV, because most people tell you turn on the TV and that's how you learn. Well, guess what? When I turned that TV on, what came up was the Beverly Hillbillies. And now I'm laughing about it, but I cried. I cried because it was like, I'll never be able to. I'll never be able to.
Yeah, it is
So,
an interesting thing. If anyone ever has not had that experience of watching a foreign film, or watching a television show that was a shot in in a different language, it is incredibly difficult to
yeah.
try to understand what's going on if you don't know the language at all. But you can learn it over time, of course. But that's a hard way to do it, for sure.
Yes.
So I would love to know about the ways in which you stay in touch with your sphere of influence in between transactions, right? So while you're working with a client, I assume you're speaking with them all the time. You're constantly servicing them. Obviously, you're doing a great job. But what happens? So they buy or sell the home, it closes, and then like, maybe they don't need you for the next 7 years or so, until they're ready to make another transaction. What do you do to keep that relationship strong during those times?
Well, if it's the first time I've done a transaction with that person, I let them know throughout the process. Listen, this is coming to a close, but I'm not going anywhere. You need me, you call me. Yeah, it doesn't matter what. I said, don't call me at 2 in the morning. But if you do, it's okay. But my phone will be on silence. Uh, but just to set that standard, that this is what you can expect. And then every now and then is more than the phone call than anything else. Because yes, we're taught to put everything in the CRM and send this and send that. And you know what? Most people will not look at it. It will end up in the spam folder, or they will unsubscribe. It's especially with the Hispanic client. And funny enough, I am the same way. So this is how I realized how it was going on, because in my case, it's kind of the opposite. When I was getting into the American culture, so that's when I realized, but hold it, this is how I felt. This is what I was going through.
Yeah.
And there's a quote that says, show me how much you care, and then we can talk. And it's literally the same thing. It literally is the same thing. Is be there. Yes, you'll be
Yeah.
invited to the birthdays. You'll be invited, to everything. Something is going on. Sometimes to big decisions. Sometimes big decisions are being made, and you're called. Listen, what do you think about this? And it is an honor. It can be scary. It can be scary, but I always tell people I will never tell anyone what to do. But what does your heart tell you? But you will be asked, because they will see you as that contact, as that person, and your phone will ring. There were times in my worst times in which it's like, okay, what's going to happen in here? Because I didn't have the mind to do anything, and overwhelmed and so forth. And the phone rings, and you talk and check it. I haven't heard from you in a while. So it's really funny because it works the opposite way. If it's been a while and you haven't made contact, you will be called because they want to know, why haven't you called? So
Yeah.
it's sweet. It's really
I,
sweet.
I love that, and I want to make sure that you made a very important point that I believe you made a very important point. I just want to underline it, which was, sending out email newsletters, which is very common, and I'm not here to tell you not to do that, because I think there's a reason to do that, and I think there's a good reason to do that. But is that necessarily going to demonstrate to a client that you care about them? No, it's just going to demonstrate that they're on your email list and you're still in the business. And that's okay. If that's the intention, if the intention is like, oh, this is all I need to do to stay in contact with somebody, is send them a newsletter. No, that's probably not going to demonstrate to anybody that you care about them. It's just going to demonstrate that you're still in business. So like you were saying, I love that you said, hey, the transaction's completed, but I'm not going anywhere. And in fact, when you need anything related to your home or anything at all, you reach out to me, and if I can't do it, I'll get you to the right person that can. That's how you demonstrate care. And that's what everybody really wants. We don't really want another email newsletter, but it's okay to do it. Just don't make that the only thing you do. And don't think that demonstrates care. It doesn't. It just demonstrates that you're a decent marketer, but it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that you're helping anyone.
And the best, that is basically set them up and forget them. That's the way I see it. And
Oh,
that's the way.
and that's the way everybody feels when they get those emails. You don't feel special for getting an
No,
email. In
even if
fact,
it's a happy birthday.
even especially if it's a happy birthday
Yep.
email that is automated, it's like,
Yep.
pick up the phone, call the person. They're probably not going to answer anyway. You'll get their voicemail, and leave them a happy birthday message, or sing them happy birthday, or do something that
Yeah.
actually demonstrates that you care. And that goes a million miles further than even, look, a text is better than an email, but a phone call, we still all love to hear somebody who, now we don't always maybe like to talk on the phone, but we love it when people reach
Yep.
out and say, hey, I'm thinking about you. Happy birthday.
Yep. That's correct.
Yeah, it's so much about demonstrating care, isn't it, to the client?
And that's the bottom line, which is it works in reality. It works with any transaction. It really works with any client. But the other reality is that with the Hispanic client is gonna, if you're resilient, if you really want that client, you're going to have to work for it. It's not going to come easy. But once you have established that relationship, it's yours. But never take it for granted either.
I wanted to ask you about the Hispanic community, specifically about first-time home buyers, because I see a huge opportunity to educate certain renters in the Hispanic community who maybe had never even pursued home ownership. Maybe they didn't know how to do it, or what the process was. Maybe they were embarrassed to ask. I know that I was embarrassed to ask when I before I bought my first place. I didn't want to ask anyone, like, what's a mortgage, how does it work. I was too embarrassed because I was in the financial services world, not in real estate. But I was like, I should know this, and I don't, and I feel silly asking. And now you can just Google everything, obviously, and learn
Yeah.
about it. But not everybody does that, and sometimes people just their blinders are on. No one's taught educated them. So I'm curious on the hey, moving from renting to home ownership, doing those kind of seminars, bringing in, inviting people in those communities that are really underserved, and teaching people about the pathway to home ownership. Was that something that you've been involved with, or do you have any suggestions about how someone may consider doing that?
I have been in the past, and there's one thing to make clear. Right now, as of last year, 7.9 million Latinos were home ownership ready financially. So the reality, but again, and they will come to those things because like in here, like we have, there's so many first time buyers assistance programs available because there are so many of them. And when they go through that program, from A to Z, they'll get explained the process. But again, they won't really, when you approach them the first time, it's like, get rid of the idea that I'm gonna get 10 leads and I'm gonna close in 6 months, I'm gonna close these 10 people. No, because the same process, you just got a head start, but you're going to start that process of developing that relationship. And you can explain the process from A to Z, but if you did not build that trust, they're going to go find someone that they will trust.
Yeah, that just makes perfect sense. And this idea of earning trust is the way that I think is of course by being of service. And I've always felt that the Hispanic community, because they put so much emphasis on family, and and again, they are historically have not been treated well by people who especially first generation, have a language barrier, obviously
Mhm.
cultural barrier, and just being seen as maybe even a threat to our country. Some people see Hispanic people as a threat, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate, but it is a reality that Hispanic people still sometimes have to deal with. And so this is really important to understand that history for anyone that really wants to serve that community, because to understand their history means you can empathize or sympathize and really get a better sense of the challenges that community faces, so that you can be of better service, that you can feel for the struggles that they've had.
And the reality, another thing to view is, what I have learned, and I'm sure everybody that's watching right now has learned as well, is, the issue is never the issue. Plain and simple. The issue is never the issue. So if something is happening, if I get upset, it's not the client, it's me. So I better go and find out what got triggered in me. So don't personalize, just professionalize and keep it up.
You were reminding me. I'm going a little bit off script for a moment. Not that we're on a script, but just off the conversation. You just reminded me of a very smart thing that I've heard is spoken about in the 12-step rooms, which is so if anyone's familiar with 12-step programs, one of the lessons that is learned in that room was people get sober or they stop doing these problematic behaviors and find a supportive community to help them through whatever addictions they might have, is they learn that when something is activated within me, it's not the event that's active. It's something like you just said that's within me that's being triggered, being adjusted. And it doesn't mean that whatever's happening externally doesn't matter. No, it does matter, but it's important to know that I am reacting a certain way and I can learn emotional regulation. I can learn how to control my response so that I can be more supportive while this chaos is happening to my client, as opposed, because the client's going to be in chaos. The client is going to, especially when something goes wrong, you know
Yeah.
this, of course, our listeners know this, something always goes wrong with every transaction. There's always a bump in the road, and during that bump the client is probably freaking out because that's what happens. It's a large financial
Mhm.
purchase or sale, and you can be the adult in the room and say, look, I know this feels a certain way. I know what this is. I know how to handle this. I am here to make sure you feel okay, and being that guide through the emotional ups and downs.
That is correct. Plus, at the same time, if every time you meet with that client, especially if they're buying, if every time, if you're building that relationship, if you are talking, I like to tell them, like I always, like I mentioned at the beginning, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and third party stories. Just tell them stories. Listen, this may happen because I tell them, please throw up on me. I don't want you to go to bed with questions because by the time you wake up, it's going to be a nightmare. So
Yes, great point.
please, 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 I want to know. You have any questions? Tell me. I want to know what's going on in your mind. And if I don't know the answer, which by now I just laugh and I said, I doubt that I won't, but if I don't, I will find out. I will find out. If something go wrong, and I tell him, if there's something that you think may go wrong, if there's something that you're not telling me, so listen, this is a divorce course. It's going to court. It's going to come out. It's
Right.
going to come out. So just tell me so we can deal with it. We can find the solution because everything has a solution. So let's just
Yeah.
talk about it and get to the bottom of it.
And I think, it reminded me of when I bought my condo, not my first purchase, by the way, a couple years ago. And by the way, I'm not a practicing realtor, but I am in with realtors every day, all day. This is my job. And I talk to realtors. I teach realtors even how to close business. And yet the night before I was closing on my condo, all of a sudden I had one of those freakouts where I was actually ice skating with my girlfriend and I couldn't even hardly get on the ice. I go, I think I've ruined my life. I think this is a terrible decision. I don't know what I'm doing. By the way, I'm in the industry. I have a license, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can't get out of this. I think I just ruined my entire life. Anyway, everything turned out fine. But the point is I suffered silently. I told my girlfriend, but she didn't really know what to do other than say, it's going to be okay. But what I really needed at that moment was another professional. I needed to share that with
Yeah.
another professional, and they needed to say, everybody feels like that. Don't worry. It's totally normal. You're going to be okay. I'm taking care of this. And so it's a good reminder that even people who you think, oh, they seem fine, you need to check in with them and allow them,
Yeah.
like you said, please throw up on me, because if you're just throwing up, like I was freaking out, and I am like, wait a minute, if I'm freaking out, it must be a real thing because I'm in the industry. Well, no, it wasn't. It was all in my
No.
head, but I didn't have anyone there to throw up on. And so as a result, I suffered, and it turned out okay, of course. But you're so absolutely right. And we forget this as realtors sometimes because we always think it's going to work out. We'll figure this out. The person might not always feel the same way.
Well, no, plus we need to find out where are they coming from?
Yeah.
Where are they and if we know them well enough, we know whether this is the first transaction, we know whether they went through a foreclosure in the past,
Right.
they lost their home, or they got denied, or they got taken by another agent, which unfortunately it's happened.
Yep.
So the more we know, when they say this, or even before they say it. Because if we know enough, we can walk a step ahead and say, listen, this is the way you may be feeling now. And I usually tell them, especially to the buyers after they sign the contract, it's like, listen, after we sign this is the process, but this is the process that we have in writing. These are the steps that are going to happen, doesn't matter what. But now let's talk about the process that you are going to go through emotionally, because
I
this is what's going on.
That is a brilliant way of saying it, and also really, really calming, because it what you're doing is, of course, is you're basically validating someone's feelings, and instead of just like, oh, it's going to work out, don't worry, I got
Yeah.
it. It's like, I understand how you're feeling. A lot of people feel this way. I'm here to guide you through. I'm I've got you, and being able to empathize with them and say, that must be a hard feeling. I get it. I hear you. I'm here to help you through it, is really what, and most people aren't willing to share that without you asking, because it's
Yeah.
embarrassing. It can be embarrassing to somebody. It can be just painful to talk about. I mean, no one wants to talk about fear, but it's there. And so what I loved about what you said is you asked, how are you feeling about this? And if they were like, oh my God, I'm totally freaking out, I don't think you'd be like, well, you shouldn't freak out. You should be like, no, I get it. Don't worry, I'm here with you. I'm going to be the rock that you can hold on to as you freak out, and we're going to get you through.
That's it. Just walk a step ahead of them. And just that and know it. You need to know what's going on and tell them this is okay. It is okay. Or if they put a little bit of distance, because people do, that tells you there's something. There
Mhm.
is something is going on that they're scared to share. And at that point, just evaluate the relationship, the agent client relationship from A to C, evaluate all those conversations, because people always tell us how they feel.
Yeah.
They always do. So, and if you know enough, and you will not be able to take offense, even if
Right.
they scream at you or whatever, because you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's not you, it's just fear.
Oh, I was yelling at my girlfriend the night before. She had
Poor
nothing
thing.
to do with the transaction. She
Yeah.
just was in the room. So I'm like, I'm yelling. I mean, I'm not blaming her, but I'm yelling. Oh my God, I freaked out. And she was just like, it's going to be okay. And I was like, you don't know. You're not in the business. I'm in the business. I'm freaking out. Right. So it happens. And you're right. Being there to really be there during those emotional moments, and making sure the person feels comfortable to share those emotional moments. Boy, they're going to tell everybody about you if you help them during those tough emotional moments, and that they feel comfortable enough to share. They're going to tell everybody,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, my
Yeah.
realtor is the greatest. Yeah.
Plus, remind them early on that the reality is, when you're going to do something new, everybody's an expert around them. Because I tell them, now you're going to go, you're going to tell someone that you're going to buy a house, everybody's going to be an expert. And I said, and people are well intentioned, people are come from a
Yes.
good heart. But the reality, and I tell them, like, for example, and I use the pimple story. For example, if you get a pimple, everybody's telling you how to get rid of it. Everybody is.
Right.
Well, the one you have to go to is a dermatologist.
Right.
Go to the expert, because you can end up burning your face. So it's okay. But if someone tells you something that puts you at unease and makes you scared, tell me, and I can explain what's going on.
Yeah, or just correct the information. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
just like you said, sometimes just bad information. Putting toothpaste on the pimple, maybe that really hurts the skin, even though it sounds like a cool little hack to fix it. Maybe that actually would make things worse. I had a similar experience at a dermatologist many years ago, where I was reading online, people were saying, oh, you should wash your hair less. It's actually bad for the scalp to wash your hair every day. And I was like, okay, I read enough articles that said it. I just assumed it was true. I went in to go see my dermatologist, who had been practicing for like 40 years. And I go, it's okay if I don't wash my hair every day, right? And he goes, no, you should wash your hair every day. And I go, no, I'm reading this stuff. He goes, that's wrong. Don't, no, I'm not, I don't know. Maybe it's different for women and for men. I'm not here to tell you what to do, anybody what to do. But he was like, no, well, I have a skin condition. So for my particular skin condition, so maybe I don't know what the average person should do, but he said, with your skin condition, you need to wash every single day. He goes, it's actually going to make it worse if you only wash your hair like 2 or 3 times a week. It's actually bad for you. And I was like, oh, he goes, yeah, don't read. If you're going to read stuff online, run it by me. I'll tell you the truth. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. So you're absolutely right. That making somebody, because who knows what people read online, they can be persuaded. They can read things that aren't in their best interest, and they don't know it. And so that's why you as a professional are so important. So Marisol, I think this is a great, perfect place to wrap up. I do want to mention for everyone listening that Marisol works in Florida, and guess where a lot of people retire to? Florida. We all know that. So at least everyone from Illinois goes down there.
Yeah.
I know my parents
Yes.
are down there as well. So if anyone out there has clients moving to Florida, whether they're, maybe a second home, maybe retirement, maybe they're moving to the Villages or one of those kind of places, wherever, especially if they're in Central Florida, reach out to Marisol. She would love the opportunity to connect with other realtors. And by the way, she has clients that move other places too. So maybe you
Yes.
can work out a nice little referral network. And by the way, too, and I don't know, Marisol, if you're looking to expand your group, your team, but of course, if you are, people can reach out to you if they think they'd be a good fit on your team. But if you have clients, if anyone has clients that are moving to Central Florida, have them reach out to Marisol, because obviously she is one of the top agents in that area. And I want everybody to follow Marisol. First, go to her website, which is G12professionalgroup.com. Link to that in the show notes, and follow her on Instagram, mjacino1 at on Instagram. So mjacino1, link to that as well in the show notes. Marisol, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. This is actually, we had a technical issue the first time we were trying to record. So Marisol was nice enough to reschedule, come back and do it all over again. So we are so grateful to you. And we, on behalf of our audience, we want to thank you for coming in and spending an hour with us. And then also on behalf of Marisol and myself, we want to thank the audience for continuing to listen and support our show. Please tell a friend. That's all that we really ever ask of you. Tell one other realtor about the show. Let them know, especially somebody that maybe wants to break into the Hispanic market or learn how to serve that community even more effectively. Send them a link to this episode. You can send them to our website, keepingitrealpod.com. Every episode we've ever done, you can stream it right from that website, or pull up a podcast app, tell your friend, pull up their podcast app, search for Keeping It Real, and hit that subscribe button. We would appreciate it. Marisol, thank you so much. We will see everyone on the next episode. And this is Memorial Day weekend. By the time this is released, it'll be past that. But I hope everyone had a wonderful Memorial Day. And for everyone watching us live, have a happy holiday. So Marisol, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a true pleasure. Take care.